Today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I am streaming to you live from beautiful Budapest here in the heart of Europe, the Carpathian Basin. I hope everybody is having a great start to their weekend. Hi again, Amar. Good to see you in this class. Hi, White Dove. In this class, we are looking at speaking part 3. And the materials come from our websites, aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com. That's general IELTShelp.com for the general version of the exam. Students, this is a speaking class, so please repeat what I say, questions and answers, corrections for your fellow students. Our websites look like this. This is our academic website. You can click that red button to join. We are partners with British Council as an official IELTS registration center. For those of you in Saudi Arabia, we can register you for your IELTS exam. The general website looks like this with the green background. You can click that big red button to join us there. You can also get our app for the academic IELTS help from your Android and Apple Play stores, app stores. If you have questions, don't be shy. Send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com. I will happily respond, usually within 24 hours or less. You can get our books, our 6 practice exams from Amazon in soft or hard copy. They're matched to the same difficulty as the Cambridge exams or the official IELTS exams. Search for AE Helps Academic IELTS or GE Helps General. These each focus on their respective topics. Okay, students, let's get into part 3 speaking. Part 3, it's the final part of your speaking test. Okay, the speaking is made up of 3 different parts. Don't try to guess the questions or predict them. It's impossible. It can be any question, okay, for your IELTS exam. So the best way is just practice lots of speaking before the exam. Go to the exam center early. Use English as much as possible on the day of your exam. Think about the examiner as your grandfather or your grandmother. Speak clearly to them. Use full sentences. Don't think that they know what you know. Use quantitative and qualitative language. It means say things like many and then say how many. 5, 10, 20, 100. Okay? So, students, let's get going with today's questions. Let's talk about tourism. So part 3, it's on a more focused topic, okay, and some more focused questions. In your opinion, why do people like to travel to other countries? We have lots of people joined in. It's great. Give me a nice full sentence answer to this question. In your opinion, why do people like to travel to other countries? All right, give me a nice full, think about what most people would say. Okay, that's an important tip. So if you ask 9 from 10 people, or if you ask 10 people, what will 9 people say to that question? So what will most people respond with? What are the popular, easy answers? Okay, that's a tip. So tip, when you are thinking about your answers for part 3, think of what 9 from 10 people would say. What's the most popular answer? Okay, practice that before you get to your exam. Carolina says certain individuals enjoy traveling abroad because they like challenges. People like to discover new places, cuisines, and different culture. I consider myself one of those who likes to travel. Last summer, I went around France and Germany and ate some really delicious French macarons. Fantastic, Carolina. That is a beautiful, beautiful answer. Okay, you gave a very nice paraphrased response using the question, and you gave me a very good explanation, and then you led into a nice, smooth flowing example. Carolina, say that nice and smooth, and you'll get a band 8 to 9 for sure. Okay. Charlie says people like to travel to other nations because they want to unwind from their daily routine and they want to explore new cultures and different foods. Charlie, don't write etc. Okay, just and so on. You don't need to say that. It has no value. Just say it and then stop, right? Okay. Aman says, as far as I'm concerned, people like traveling because it helps them improve their knowledge in terms of culture and language, as well as history. That's good. Just be careful with your word choice, Aman. Jamb. Don't repeat the word traveling. Use a pronoun for the second one, it. And as far as my perspective is concerned, is awkward phrasing. It makes sense, but it's awkward phrasing. As far as I'm concerned, is the simpler, more common way to use that expression. So careful, students. Make sure that when you're using an expression, it's accurate. Okay. Amar says, some people like to discover cultures in other countries. Amar, that's too short and quick. It's good, but I can't give you a high band because it's not expressive. I can't judge that you actually have high-level English with a simple answer like that. So I know that a lot of teachers, a lot of IELTS institutions seem to be telling students to keep your answers short, but that's not necessarily good advice. Your answers should not be short, they should not be long. You need to find the happy middle. It's kind of like the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Maybe some of you know it, maybe some of you don't. It's a very famous children's story. It's where Goldilocks is lost in the forest and she finds a little house where there's nobody home. And there's food on the table. And she tries the first and it's too hot. And she tries the second, it's too cold. And she tries the third and it's just right. Anyway, the story goes on, but the idea is that your answers should not be too long off topic, and they should not be so short that I can't judge your level of English. Okay? So pay careful attention. All right? Hadi Ipek says, as I had mentioned in part 2, I'm really into traveling. It keeps me energetic and young as it is a good way to gain experience. In addition, the earth has many beautiful places that I must see. All right, Hadi, it's not bad. You're connecting to part 2, but you do need to answer the question, why do people like to travel to other countries? So, individuals, I think that individuals, or to be more specific, tourists, like to explore various nations for their unique culture, cuisine, and architecture. I myself visited Egypt last year and was amazed by the pyramids. Okay. All right. So, repeat after me. I think that tourists like to explore various nations for their unique culture, cuisine, and architecture. I myself visited Egypt last year and was amazed by the pyramids. So, it's still a fairly simple answer, right, Amar? The difference is that I use the question, I paraphrase it, I give some vocabulary. Tourists like to explore various nations. And then I include a quick, smooth flowing example that backs up that answer. So don't say for example or don't say for instance because it scares the examiners these days. They think you're going to talk forever about some situation and go off topic. So instead of doing that, just say the example. So instead of saying, for example, I visited Egypt, just say, I visited Egypt last year and was amazed by the pyramids. Your example, as long as it's strongly connected with your answer, it makes sense. You don't have to say, for example. You just say it, you stop, and boom, you got some band marks, some points for fluency and coherence. Okay? Again, one more time, students. In your opinion, why do people like to travel to other countries? I think that tourists like to explore various nations for their unique culture, cuisine, and architecture. I myself visited Egypt last year and was amazed by the pyramids. Next question. Do you think it is good or bad for countries to welcome tourists? So, do you think it is good or bad for countries to welcome tourists? So, Satisfying Time says, well, that depends on what the country itself can offer for the visitors, such as hotels, restaurants, and enjoyments. If all of those are applicable, then yes, it's extremely beneficial for the country. Satisfying Times, it's not bad. So it's nice English, nice vocabulary, nice fluency in grammar. But the overall quality of the answer is, in my opinion, not ideal. And I'll explain in just a moment why. Jitendra says, nowadays, Jitendra, that's all one word. Nowadays. It's spelt as one word, nowadays. Nowadays, people are workaholics and they want to reduce their anxiety and stress, so they explore new places. Jitendra, that's for the previous, but it is a good point to make to students that nowadays is one word in English. It's kind of an interesting one. It's 3 words linked into one. Juan Pablo Avila says, I believe it's positive for nations to welcome tourists because they often bring money to spend, and when a country is visited, it's a good sign in terms of popularity. Juan Pablo, that's a nice answer. So that's the better approach. Satisfying Times, I strongly suggest avoiding the concept and the words "it depends." There are very, very few questions where the correct answer is "it depends," or where you should answer "it depends." The problem, students, is that when you say "it depends," it gets most students into trouble. Okay, from my experience and all of the candidates that I interviewed for the speaking exam, most of the time when the candidate started their answer with "it depends," they ended up with a more confusing, lower quality answer. So you need to be really careful with that, okay? So tip, if you are asked about good or bad, you should just choose one side and go with it, instead of saying that depends or it depends. When students do this, they usually give lower quality, more confusing responses. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, it's an important tip. Okay, again, think of what 9 from 10 people would say. All right, so just remember that your goal is to get those high band scores. Chinonso Tiklar says, although there are negative aspects of allowing tourists into a country, I believe it is more of a positive because there is revenue from tourism. Sure. Okay. I'll show you what I would do. So I would do something like this. I strongly believe that tourism is a positive for most countries, not only because it increases economic power, but also because it allows the sharing of cultures and history. I know that my province of British Columbia earns more than $10 billion annually from the millions of tourists who come to visit and explore its natural beauty. Okay, so again, repeat after me. Notice how it's much more powerful of an answer than simply saying it depends, or well, it could be good or bad. It can be good because, and it can be bad because. No, I'm just going to go with one side, focus on it, go into detail, okay, go into depth. And here we go. Repeat after me. Do you think it is good or bad for countries to welcome tourists? I strongly believe that tourism is a positive for most countries, not only because it increases economic power, but also because it allows the sharing of cultures and history. I know that my province of British Columbia earns more than $10 billion annually from the millions of tourists who come to visit and explore its natural beauty. That's a bad 9 answer. Okay? It's unique, it's specific, it answers the question, explains it, and gives an example rapidly. Okay? That will earn you a high band. All right? So again, remember this tip, students. If possible, you should just choose one side, not explain both sides. The examiner has lots of questions for you. Okay? And in part 3, you often have these follow-up questions. So if you stick to one side, it's usually easier to answer the follow-up question. And here's our follow-up question for this one. Can you give examples? So of it being good or bad, obviously. So can you give examples of tourism being a positive or a negative, depending on which side you chose? If you chose both, now you're stuck having to think of examples for both sides. Again, more tricky, can be more confusing. Okay? Pachu says, for example, our country of Nepal is going to celebrate Visit Nepal 2020. Its main aim is to attract 8 million tourists, which will reveal to the world the natural beauty of the country, including its unique jungles and wildlife, such as the Bengal tiger. Right, Pachu? Beautiful, those Bengal tigers. Satisfying Time says, for example, Morocco is a country that depends 85% on tourist revenue every year, which helps governments to improve the quality of life for residents and build schools and hospitals. Satisfying times. That is a beautiful answer, right? And now you're focused on one side. So that's really good. Huddy says it is absolutely good due to the financial benefits for the country, like Turkey, which has a large amount of tourist revenue that helps to develop infrastructure like roads, schools, and hospitals. Amanjam says, for example, Canada is encouraging tourism through advertising because it's enhancing their standard of living. Amanjam, that's a little bit confusing. Think about a more accurate way to answer that question. Oh, Egypt gets a lot of income from tourism and tourists as well. Amar, that's the same thing. Tourism is the tourists. The tourists pay for tourism. So the tourism industry is the tourists, basically. Okay. Umer, good luck on your speaking exam. Pay attention in this class and repeat what I say. And repeat your fellow students. Shakrani says, yes, certainly Afghanistan is known mostly for earning money through tourism, roughly $1 billion a year. Okay, I'm sure it earns more than $1 million. All right, so aside from what I just mentioned regarding Colombia, I'm certain that some nations like Costa Rica earn over a half of their GDP through the tourism industry. In addition, many people in Europe and Africa learn about the rich history and dynasties of China by visiting there. Okay, so give more examples. If you gave an example in your first answer, don't just say, oh yeah, I just gave you an example and wait for the next question, but instead go into more detail. So can you give examples? Notice how it's a plural. It's not can you give an example? So respect the plurals in the questions. If the question is asking a plural, then give at least two. Okay, if you're only giving one, then it's an inaccurate answer because you gave an example, you didn't give examples. All right, so connect among your answers. Aside from what I just mentioned regarding British Columbia, I'm certain that some nations like Costa Rica earn over half of their GDP through the tourism industry. In addition, many people in Europe and Africa learn about the rich history and dynasties of China by visiting there. Okay, specific examples. Visualize it, put it together. All right. Preeti says, for example, India has a remarkable and glorious history with thousands of historical monuments which attract tourists. Therefore, millions of people come across the world and increase its local businesses and improve the lifestyles of individuals, not to mention learning about the history of Buddhism, about ancient architecture through visiting places like the Taj Mahal, right, Preeti? You know those facts, use them, visualize them. Hey, if I can use them as a Canadian in Hungary, then you can certainly use them as a person living in India, right? Okay. So, Omer says, or Omer is asking, how long should we speak and answer to each question in part 3? That's a good question, Omer. If you take a look at my answers, you'll notice that they're relatively, on average, 4 lines, so between 3 to 4 lines. Now, I'm using a fairly big font, so I have probably about 30 words per question. It does depend on the question. Here, it's a little bit shorter. I can keep it more concise. You definitely should not be talking and talking and talking, okay? So there's no perfect answer, Omer. You should think roughly 2 sentences. Answer, explain, example. That's what should be rolling through your mind. Use the question in your answer. Use the grammar of the question in your answer. Omer, for your exam on Monday, make sure in the speaking that if you hear a present perfect question, like how has tourism changed in Europe over the past decade, make sure you use the present perfect. So say there has been a lot of changes in tourism. 10 years ago, mostly Europeans traveled around Europe, but this has now expanded to other parts of the world, and there are many visitors from Asia and North America also. So use the present perfect in that case. Okay, if it's conditional, use the conditional. All right, some tips to help you get those better band scores. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Ooh, there it is. It's kind of like what I just said. Look at that. How has tourism changed in your country over the years? So quite similar, and I gave you a big tip on how to answer that question with high band scores. So how has tourism changed in your country over the years? Okay, so that's kind of, what does it mean over the years? It means in the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years. It's up to you to decide what that means, but it usually means in your lifetime since you've been a child. Okay? All right. Tuguldur says, my country has had many positive changes in its tourism industry. In a decade, we created many tourist companies which help tourists in a plethora of ways, but then again, created employment in society. Tuguldur, okay, the word plethora will not get you a band 9 on its own. Go into more detail, Tuguldur. So, what do you mean help tourists? Okay, so how do you help tourists? Are there more tourism info centers, more hotels, more activities, so tourist companies that take them on adventures like whitewater rafting? So go into a little bit of a clearer explanation there, Tuguldur. Okay. Kamlesh says, in my country, there were more tourist areas where historical places and buildings such as temples and forts before a couple of decades, but now there are several recreational sectors. And Kamlesh, first point, there is no present perfect in your answer. My question is present perfect. How has tourism changed? You need to show me present perfect. Otherwise, I can't give you a very good band score. So you really need to do that. I'll show you how, Kamlesh. So in my country, let me guess, maybe India, I'm guessing. Okay. Oh, just a moment. I don't know why my camera decided to take a snooze, but I'll get you back in just a moment here. And then create that present perfect example for you, Kamlesh. So here we go. Meanwhile, you get to look at the happy face of my daughter when she was just a tiny wee little baby. Here we go. All right. Back to Kamlesh. In India, there have been many new tourist areas built over the past few years, and where temples and forts had stood a few decades before, there are now recreational businesses. Okay, Kamlesh, present perfect. Okay, that's how you do it. All right, let's take one more. Sharma Shishir says, in the last 5 years, my country, is it maybe India? I don't know. Sharma, students, name your country. Okay, so name your country. Don't just say my country. If it's India, say India. If it's Taiwan, say Taiwan. Okay, so Sharma, in the last 5 years in India, tourism has developed in various aspects, and culture has been influenced by the millions of visitors coming from across the globe. Sharma, again, present perfect. Watch your word choice and your grammar. Thank you, Mikrad. I appreciate that warm thought going out to my daughter. All right. Lucas, in my country of, just going to guess, maybe go with Greece. Lucas says, in Greece, tourism has changed dramatically over the past decade. Everyone has the ability to access airports easily, and together with this technology has improved rapidly. Okay, little bit off topic, not terrible. All right, let me give you an answer. So there have been many advancements in the tourism industry in Canada over the past few decades. Namely, Canadians have established thousands of eco-tourism businesses which attract millions of people to explore its natural beauty. As I had briefly touched on for a previous question. One such activity is visiting northern Canada to see the northern lights, known as the Aurora Borealis. All right, here we go. So, repeat after me. How has tourism changed in your country over the years? There have been many advancements in the tourism industry in Canada over the past few decades. Namely, Canadians have established thousands of eco-tourism businesses which attract millions of people to explore its natural beauty, as I had briefly touched on for a previous question. One such activity is visiting northern Canada to see the northern lights, known as the Aurora Borealis. All right. If anybody ever has the chance, one of the coolest natural phenomenon to see in the world. That's when the night sky lights up like a curtain of bright colors that dance. It's quite magical and powerful, and northern Canada is certainly a place where you can see that. Also northern Russia, of course. Okay, again, going back to Omer's question, notice the length. It's again roughly 4 lines, almost 5. And I'm answering, I'm explaining, I'm making a connection, again, to a previous answer. I'm naming my country specifically. I'm talking about Canada. And I give a smooth flowing example of the change in tourism. So one new activity is the visiting of the northern region of Canada to see the northern lights. Okay? Using quantitative language, millions of people, right? Visual language, natural beauty. So aim for this. Now, you don't see the follow-up question, of course. Only the examiner sees this question. Has this been a positive? So, has this been a positive? Answer the follow-up question for me, students. Has this been a positive? So, many of you told me about how tourism has changed in your country. Has this been a positive for your country, the changes in tourism over the past years? Give me your answer. Let's see what you have. Hadi says, in my opinion, it is definitely a positive because sharing culture and beliefs always helps humankind to be moral. Furthermore, growing the tourism industry has created much employment. Good, Hadi. I improved your vocabulary a little bit, so pay attention to that. Kwan La says, should we include an example in every answer? Kwan, no. No, it gets a little bit weird if you have an example for every question. Try to identify. So Kwan, it's a good question that you're asking. Okay, so Kwan La is asking, should I include an example, a personal example for every question? No, definitely don't. That's weird. Okay, include them for ones where it may be obvious to include. And if I have to tell you how often, I would say maybe for every second question. So about 50% of part 1, part 3, I would put a smooth flowing example in my answer to back up my explanation. Okay. Sharma Shishir says, yes, of course, because millions of people now know the tallest peak as Mount Everest, and that the birthplace of Gautam Buddha is India, and also have fond memories of the beautiful temples around the country. Okay, Sharma, that's good. Again, I improved the overall flow and grammar a little bit, so pay attention to that. Pachu says, nowadays, people in our country, Pachu, name your country, have learned more through tourism and improved their life positively. Okay, Pachu, that's a much more natural way to express what you're thinking than saying develop their life in good condition. No native English speaker would say develop their life in good condition. So careful, okay? Have improved their life positively. Okay, that's the natural way to express that. Shang Hung says, I strongly believe that, and then you retracted the rest of it, Shang Hung, so I can't read on. Surinder says, yes, indeed, it has created awareness among the general population in India how they should behave with foreigners, mainly due to TV commercial ads. Interesting, Surinder. I'm not exactly sure what ads you're referring to, but it's good. Okay. Omer is asking, are there drawbacks to speaking for 1.5 minutes instead of 2 in part 2? Yes and no, Omer. Keep this in mind, Omer. An expert level speaker or a very good speaker, Omer is a band 8, expert speaker is a band 9, will most likely speak for 2 minutes in part 2, giving further details to the questions on the cue card. Having said that, if you are able to clearly answer all of the questions on the cue card in 1.5 minutes, then you can still get a very good band score. But again, an expert or a very good speaker or user of English can speak specifically for 2 minutes without going off topic on those questions. If necessary, able to elaborate and refer back to other questions later on if they've covered all the questions. Okay. All right. Let's take the next topic for part 3. Here we go. Let's discuss city planning. Whew, what a shift. Okay. Be ready for that, students. So if you are a good user of English, so you're a band 7, okay, or you're a fluent user of English, you're a band 6.5, then there is a chance that the examiner will shift topics in part 3. The questions will still be related to the topic of part 2, but from a little bit of a different perspective than what you were speaking about. So far we were talking about tourism, and now suddenly the examiner says, let's discuss city planning. Whoa, what? But wait a second. Those aren't completely separate. Tourism and city planning are kind of connected. All right. Here we go. First question. What are some ways that cities in your country are changing in the past decade? Okay. What are some ways? Surinder, you're very, very welcome. Make sure to Surinder to check us out at ahelp.com for academic IELTS or gieltshelp.com for general. You'll find lots more high quality HD video lessons as well as practice exams there. Okay. All right. Satisfying Time says one of the main changes that people will notice visiting my country. Ladies and gents, what is your country? Name your country. We are from all over the world in this live chat. People cannot guess your country. We are not mind readers. So Satisfying Times, one of the main changes that you will notice visiting India are the modern buildings which weren't there 5 years ago. As there were old, gorgeous buildings that show the history of the place. I'm a little bit confused by the end of that. Okay. Tuguldur says, in the last decade, many bus stops were built in my city of Ub, which overall has had a positive impact by giving residents convenient and quick commute from their homes to other locations, even those who live on the outskirts of the city, to go to lower cost areas. Tuguldur, too much information too quickly. Focus, give detail, but don't give too much. Okay? Otherwise it's confusing. Shahrani says, yes, certainly I do believe that it has been a positive in my country of Afghanistan. Not only have most Afghans been employed through tourism, but many have also become familiar with the cultures of other countries. Shahrani, thank you for naming your country. It sounds much better. And everybody in the class can also identify that, okay, Shahrani is talking about Afghanistan. It's perfect. Even if you're doing your exam in that country, name your country. It just sounds better, okay? It sounds better. All right. So here we go. Many cities across Canada have undergone rapid development in the past 10 years. Some of this has been a result of tourism, as I discussed previously in regards to new businesses and new infrastructure has also been built to further improve the lives of Canadians. Okay, and you might add a little bit in there, like such as schools, parks, such as highways, and electrical lines. All right, here we go. Repeat after me. What are some ways that cities in your country are changing in the past decade? Many cities across Canada have undergone rapid development in the past 10 years. Again, notice the have for the present perfect. Okay. Why? Because it's changing in the past 10 years. And present perfect is used to show change over time. So even though the question isn't asking me present perfect, I'm using present perfect because I know that one of the big reasons for using present perfect is to show change over time. So many cities across Canada have undergone rapid development in the past 10 years. One decade is 10 years. Some of this has been a result of tourism, as I discussed previously, in regards to new businesses. So again, making that connection to previous answers. And new infrastructure, such as highways and electrical lines, have also been built to further improve the lives of Canadians. All right. Is this good or bad? So follow-up question. Again, is this good or bad? All right. Give me a nice full sentence answer for this one. Sundar, you have some good ideas, but you need to watch your grammar. I read it while students are answering this question. So Shakrani Nimatullah says, well, I believe that most of the cities in Afghanistan experience dramatic developments in the past 10 years, not only in terms of natural beauty, but also creating streets, paving streets. It's not concreting streets. Shakrani, it's paving streets. Paving, paving streets. Okay. Omer says, can I talk about another nation by simply saying, I don't know much about my country, however, in France, or is this a bad idea? Omer, it's definitely a bad idea. It sounds really strange, and it sounds like you don't understand what I'm asking. You can't shift or change the topic of the question, Omer. You have to answer what's being asked. If you try to shift the topic, I don't know much about that, but I will tell you about this. I guarantee that the examiner will most likely interrupt you and go to the next question. Okay? Students, do not, in the speaking, do not say, I'm not sure about that, but I will tell you about this. The examiner will interrupt you and go to the next question. They don't want to hear about an off-topic answer. And if you say, I don't know much about this, but I'll tell you about that, it's a sure way to tell the examiner that you're going off-topic. Okay? Lucas says, it is totally bad, even though this traction pulls people from rural areas to the cities. The traffic jam has become a major issue in cities. Okay. Sheng Hung says, the new infrastructure with technology in Taiwan is great. Like share bikes named U-Bike, which you can rent in many public places instead of buying your own or being stuck walking long distances from one place to another. Sheng Hung, very good. You named your country. You gave me a good explanation. You gave me a nice example. Fantastic. That's how you get a good band score. Okay, that's really good. All right. So, this has certainly been a positive direction for Canadians as communications and travel are faster and better than ever before. In fact, on the new Island Highway, I can now get to neighboring cities in half the time that it used to take me back in 2000. Okay, so there's my answer. Again, repeat after me. This has certainly been a positive direction for Canadians as communications and travel are faster and better than ever before. In fact, on the new Island Highway, I can now get to neighboring cities in half the time that it used to take me back in 2000. Okay? Mekrad is asking a really good question. Mekrad is asking, being clear and using simple vocabulary, is it more important than using high-level words which you may not be using correctly? Yes, absolutely, Mekrad. So it's much more important that you create clear communication. Vocabulary is not necessarily as important as being able to use complex grammar. You can get so this is an important note for everybody watching. You can get quite a high score using fairly simple vocabulary if you can use complex grammar. So you can use present perfect, conditionals, adjective clauses accurately. Okay? If you use high-level vocabulary in simple sentences, which is usually very awkward in English, your score will not be very good. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, that's a really important tip. Students, that's it for today and for this week of live IELTS classes. I will be back on Wednesday with usual times from Wednesday to Saturday with more live streaming of IELTS listening, reading, writing, and speaking to help you get those great band scores. Until then, do check us out at aehelp.com for academic IELTS and check us out at gieltshelp.com for general. We have tons of great materials, videos, practice exams and strategies, join our premium course. Click that red button. Do yourself a favor, especially if you're paying for that expensive IELTS exam. Don't sit it 2-3 times. Sit it once. Get it done right. Click that red button for academic. I wish you a fantastic rest of the weekend. You're very welcome, Carolina. And I also wish you a great start to the week. Keep your chin up. Be positive. You are all beautiful people, miracles of this universe. Go forward and have a great rest of your day. Sweet dreams if it's late in your country. Bye for now, everyone.